Hello and welcome to this webinar, which is brought to you by the Disaster and Military section of ESTES, the European Society for Trauma and Emergency Surgery. In this session, we'll be trying to answer the question, is there a golden hour to prepare your hospital for a mass casualty incident? And helping us do that will be our panel of experts. Simon Herman is an orthopedic trauma surgeon from the University Medical Center in Ljubljana in Slovenia. He's president of the Disaster and Military section and also president of the Slovenian MRMI organization. Boris Hrečkovski is chief surgeon at Slavonski Brod Hospital in Croatia. He was one of the founders of the Medical Response to Major Incidents course. Karl Montan is a senior consultant vascular and general surgeon at the Karolinska University Hospital in Stockholm. He is currently General Secretary of the International Association of Medical Response to Major Incidents and Disasters. He's also Vice Chair of the Disaster and Military section. And finally, we have Itamar Ashkenazi, a General Surgeon from Rambam Medical Center in Israel. He's the immediate past President of the Disaster and Military section and has experienced one or two major incidents in his time. So to start the webinar proper, I'd like to hand over to Simon Herman for his presentation. Simon.
Hello, everybody. At the webinar, is there a golden hour to prepare your hospital for a mass casualty incident? I hope in the end there won't be a unanimous answer, but we will all think about it, what to do in case of a medical emergency with many casualties. Before we start with the analysis, please answer this poll question and state your opinion. Does hospital has always time to prepare for the massive arrival of patients? Please choose yes or no. Okay, that's interesting. To see what's the opinion of the audience. Let's go on. To put matters into perspective, I will just state a few facts quickly. I am from Slovenia, which is a country in the middle of in the Central Europe, with around 2 million inhabitants and 20,000 square kilometers of surface. We have 2 level 1 trauma centers, 1 level 2 trauma center in Celje, and the rest are level 3 trauma centers. But for our lecture, we will talk only about Ljubljana University Hospital, which is a level 1 trauma center, a true level 1 trauma center, and the rest are Jesenice, Nova Gorica, Izola, and we will also mention Novo Mesto, and these are all smaller hospitals with the level 3 trauma center. In the analysis, there are 6 major incidents. In a sense, they are all some kind of transport accident. There are 3 highway pile-up crashes, 1 bus flip, and 1 train collision and the hot air balloon crash. Now, before we go on, please answer also the question 2. In case of the massive casualty incident, there is no prior warning or sign before the patient starts arriving. Please choose true or false. Well, if the vote is over, I'll say both questions can be true. Why? Because it depends on your medical system, how the hospitals are connected with the pre-hospital setting. Let's go on. Now, the first accident happened on Saturday, 11 years ago in the highway. You see 37 vehicles was injured, we have 21 injured patients. It's not much for the Paris or London, but it was a lot of patients in the same time for Slovenia or our settings. We had 3 yellow, 9 yellow, 8 green patients. 2 were dead on the scene and 1 died later in the hospital. And you can see that the female to male ratio was pretty much the same. Also, the age was from children to the elderly. And the distance from our hospital on the map was 40 kilometers, but because of the place of the accident, in reality, the ambulances had to do 50 kilometers. And before we start actually with the analyze, and please answer the third question. In case of massive casualty incident, patients usually start arriving soon after the accident and take a gradual arrivals or take massive arrivals in a short period of time, or they start to arrive relatively late, more than 90 minutes after the accident. And again, you can choose between gradual and massive arrival. Please choose your answers. Now, can we see the answers? Yes, interesting. We'll see probably the first, but we'll see what our analysis is telling us. Now you can see here on the left is the time 0 and the first arrival, and then how much time it took to do the basic treatment and admit the patients from the emergency ward to the regular wards on intensive care unit. And you can see that it took 1 hour and 45 minutes for the first patients to arrive from this first accident. And you can see in a small period of time, all the patients then arrived. The second one was the overturning of the bus, because the driver fell asleep. You see, it was at 5:40 in the morning. They drove the whole night, and they slowly, this stretch of highway is totally straight. So he fell asleep and slowly went from the tarmac to the grass, and then they turned over. There were 29 injured, and there were 3 red patients, 1 yellow, 25 green. Again, 13 to 16 female to male ratio. Again, all the patients were in different ages, but you can see that 25 of them were minors. They were below 18 years of age. They were school children going to the vacations. And what's even more important, they were all foreigners, so they didn't speak our language. The distance was 20 kilometers. And you see, it took 50, oh, this went away, but never. It took 57 minutes for the first one to arrive. And I'm sorry, this is a bit skewed. And then in a short period of time, all of them arrived. As with the first incident, there were all the patients arrived to the one hospital. It was a hospital in Ljubljana. While in the first instance, they didn't distribute the patients because they didn't think of it. It was 2010, before we started with MRMI courses. In this second occasion, there was a conscious decision because of the language barrier and other issues to bring all the patients to the same hospital, to the same spot. The third one was the crash of the hot air balloon. Here you see the gondola of the balloon. It's registered, officially registered for 32 occupants.
and it was full to capacity. When this happened, you see the time, it was early in the morning. There were 4 deaths on the scene and 2 later in the hospital. The death was due to the burns. And you see, in that occasion, the patients were distributed among 4 hospitals actually. And what's important is the reds were in the majority. At first, 10 were triaged as red, but altogether 12 need intubations. And the distance was very short, and it was again, all were brought initially to the same emergency department, but later distributed. And you can see, yeah, well, this something went afraid. It took 55 minutes to arrive for the first patient. Also, the distance was small, but due to the heavy injuries, they first had to be treated at the scene. And also, they were scattered because they didn't fall on one place. They were falling when the balloon was crashing, so they had to find all the patients. And the fourth one is the train collision with 34 injured. There were 9 triaged as red, 25 green, and out of these 34, 4 were later transferred to Ljubljana. In this case, everybody went to the same hospitals because the distance was only 1.25 kilometers away. And you can see finally the one with the true setting. You see it, even that the first were self-evacuees who ran from the scene to the hospital, but it took them 28 minutes to reach the hospital for distance 1.25 of the kilometer. The fifth injury, the fifth crash was on Sunday, at December 2014, in the middle of the day, due to cold weather and strong winds and snow. This all combined to facilitate the pile crash with 49 vehicles, 1 bus, and 3 heavy units. There were 57 patients injured. Luckily, 46 were green and only 1 was dead on scene, 1 red. And altogether, there were 12 ambulances dispatched because most of these green patients were treated at the nearby emergency level 4 emergency center. And the distance to the main hospital in Ljubljana was 50 kilometers. And you can see arrivals here. Or again, the patients were distributed to the 3 different hospitals. And you see, it took 2.25 hours for the first patient to arrive to Šempeter near Nova Gorica. To our hospital, it took 2 hours 25 minutes for the first one to arrive. And for the third hospital, we couldn't get the data after a few months when we tried to get analysis. Now, and the last crash was nearly 1 year later. It was on Saturday again on the highway at 2 o'clock in the fog. And there were 56 vehicles, 1 bus, 7 heavy units, 29 injured of 128 altogether. There were 4 dead on scene, 3 red, 5 yellow, and 17 green. A lot of ambulances were dispatched because this was a bit farther away than the other ones, and they couldn't do turns. And it took a long time for everything to clear, nearly 1 hour 32 minutes to Šempeter and nearly 2 hours to the Izola, and again to Ljubljana 2 hours 25 minutes. So if we look to our table here, we see that the number of injured in the latter cases to the hospital were lower because due to the MRMI training, they were distributed to different hospitals. It took nearly always more than an hour for the first patients to arrive. You can see in this column, and when that happens, the time frame of arrivals was relatively short. So you can see here how many patients from these accidents arrived per hour. It's 15, 23, 26, 27, which is also for a bigger center quite a number, unless, as in the last two cases, they are distributed to the different hospital. So if I summarize, mean time lapse between accident and arrival to hospital is usually more than an hour. That's for the first question, whether do we have the time to prepare or not. Injured arrive then densely. Oh, I'm sorry, this is too much. Good communication allows good preparation for mass arrival of injured. That means if we get word, we can prepare the hospital, and the good communication within the hospital and also from the scene can also allow for better coordination and use of capacity, meaning we don't wait for too much heavy patients if there are none or less of them. So question 4, in case of MCI or training exercise, there is, how many of you have direct communication between hospitals and emergency site services at the accident site? How many can communicate via regional command center, health command center, or some other facility? And how many are never, how to say, in communication with the site, either directly or via some other panel? Please vote. Do we have any results yet? Okay. Yeah, I see that mostly the communication is possible via some regional command center. This is very good. We are in our country, we are now switching to this kind of communication also. And for the last, this is one typical site. You see different medical services. Please vote what's the situation in your country. The statement is, in my medical system, the whole chain, rescue services, pre-hospital, emergency medical services, and hospital trains together. And this is always, rarely, or never. Please vote. Yes. Oh, I'm surprised and I'm delighted to see the result. Excellent. That's what the MRMI stands for. Okay, that's it from the introduction from my talk, and now we switch to discussion.
Okay, thank you very much, Simon, for that overview and that great presentation of your experience over recent years. I think the first question has to be to the other members of the panel. Is that something that you're all familiar with, the idea that the majority of patients will arrive more than an hour after the accident or incident starts? We start, Boris. Do you want to answer that question first of all?
Okay, first we have to classify what is the cause of the mass casualty incident. We didn't do that in the beginning because all this, what Simon shows, it's traffic accidents by bus collisions, multiple car crash, and so on. So number one cause for mass casualty incident and disasters, which include trauma in the world, it's not car accidents or collisions. There are floods, and there is a long preparation time and a long preparation phase. So every hospital should be prepared enough. This is the number one cause. So, but that doesn't change anything. You remember that tragedy work for disaster preparation in the United States and in Cincinnati when the Mississippi River was going out and how many people died. That's also trauma because there are victims. Or you have 180 people died recently in Germany because of trauma of suddenly floods. But they got the signs for preparation. Did they preparation or not? So it's very hard to answer on that kind of questions because we didn't put. It's only matters. Simon shows only traffic accidents, trauma caused by traffic accidents, and one balloon crash, whatever. So I think there is enough time for every hospitals to get prepared if they do have the plans and the personnel who can achieve that. If they are not educated for that principle, it will be disaster in the hospital also. So our experience here in Croatia or in Slavonski Brod, where is my hospital, we got a mass casualty incident recently 1 month ago, and we did it excellent with yellow alert. 10 people we have dead on a scene. It was a bus collision, only one bus. We got 42 patients admitted to the hospital in 1 hour. It was very close to the hospital, 10 kilometers away. We got 8 MRMI instructors. 4 of them were on scene, and 4 of them were in the hospital on the duty, and everything was excellent, whatever. And the critical function of critical importance were medical incident commander at scene, which in that case was MRMI instructor on duty outside, and it was the function of critical importance was officer in a chief or medical doctor doctor who is the leading hospital triage, and it was surgeon, trauma surgeon. It was me. Okay, I was that guy during that MCI incident, and everything was well done. No one died in transport, no one died in hospital, and we keep that the last patients went out from our hospital after 6 weeks of medical care. So in generally, we are in a full power, or my hospital is in a full power, or we are in a training with hospital command group running continuously almost 2 years, because we treat COVID-19 virus epidemic like a continuous threat to our normal hospital work. So we applied MRMI principles for trauma medical response during the medical response during the against COVID epidemic. So we are in a full training. So if everything what is happening near our hospitals will get full response immediately. That's something good what we get during this Corona time. If we didn't do that, we will be in problem. So if you are in training, that's what I want to stress, that regular training and education for medical response for mass casualty incident or disasters is #1 priority. Okay, that's enough from me for now.
Thank you, Boris. Itamar, do you want to comment on that? Because you probably have a very different perspective on major incidents.
Well, I think Boris said it very clearly, and I think even Simon actually demonstrated it in his examples, that it really depends on the circumstances. And the circumstances can be that you will get the patients after 1 hour, after 2 hours, or after 10 minutes. And it really, it is different. If you look, for example, at the terrorist attacks that occurred in London, in the metro, in the subway, okay, just, without a mass casualty, to get out of those, of a station takes you 1 hour. It's like so deep inside. So this is the reason why it took so much time to get the people in London to the hospitals. And in Israel, most of our mass casualties were either motor vehicle accidents or bombing or mass shooting terrorist attacks. And usually we received those patients within 1 hour. And when I say within 1 hour, within 1 hour, we got all of our patients. So basically, after 10 or 15 minutes of receiving the alert, and we usually did receive the alert, we would start getting the patients, and within 1 hour, I think 90% of the patients will already be in the hospital. And one more, so it really depends on the circumstances. And I have to say something else, which I think Boris emphasized this issue, and I'll maybe say it in other words. And it relates to Simon's first question. Do we have time to prepare? And yes, we have time to prepare. Sometimes we have less, sometimes we have more. But if you don't know what to do with this 1 hour, let's say you have 1 hour to prepare. If you don't know what you want to achieve in that 1 hour, even if you have this 1 hour or 2 hours, you will achieve nothing. And if you know what to do in this first hour, you'll probably be able to achieve it in 15 minutes as well. So it really depends what you want to achieve. You have to have clear in your mindset. You have to have like a clear idea what you want to achieve in the first half hour, and then what you want to achieve in the first hour and in the first 2 hours, depending on the circumstances. Because as you saw from the examples, not all the mass casualty events that were described by Simon happened during office hours. Some of them happened during non-office hours. And then there is a different issue because most of your staff is not inside the hospital. So I hope I answered your question.
Thank you. Yes, you did. Carl, have you anything to add?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Simon, for brilliant talk. Well, geography is of key here, of course, and we've seen incidents taking place very close to hospitals where people do self-evacuate and come up very quickly to the hospital, but not quicker than 30 minutes most of the time. Something we urge very much and practice a lot and talk about a lot in the courses also is how you stay and play versus load and go. And one of the key points here is to get the ambulances rolling really, really quick. And that is very, very hard sometimes. There was a beautiful report from the train crash out of Milano that was very close actually to many of the big hospitals, and Mauro, Zago could certainly say more about this, but the first patient was in 1.5 hours, even though it was very close. So it depends on the system you're building up pre-hospitally. So in general, the question that was asked, if we do we have time to prepare? And usually we do, but the question is also quite neatly formed, because we always have time to prepare, not just those hours before, but actually all the rest of the year we need to prepare for this. And that's something that I want to add as well.
Thank you, Carl. That's a very valid point, that we always have time to prepare, although it may not be for something that we know is going to come immediately. One of the interesting questions that that Boris, I think, and Ita have brought up is that you have some time to prepare. And what do you do first? What are your priorities in that, whatever time it is, whether it's the 10 minutes, 15 minutes, the hour, or the 2 hours? What's your first priority? What do you want to achieve first?
May I ask, answer the first?
Please do, Simon. Yeah.
Yes. Well, in the first hour, at least in our hospital, is to form the hospital command group, which will oversee, I mean, not in the first hour, it should be formed in less than 10 minutes, and it shall oversee what's the situation in the hospital and what to do and what is to be expected from the site. If you see that hot air balloon crash, it happened just before the office hours. So the whole hospital was there. That was a lucky time, really a lucky hit. Whole hospital was there. They stopped all the programmed operations, everything. And actually you have the hospital like in the red alert waiting just to receive all these casualties. So this is the instance to show, if you have a hospital command group quickly formed, how to deal with the emergency, because you can stop all the non-necessary, non-urgent procedures and be prepared for arrival of massive arrival of injured. That's my answer. I hope it's the right, not the right one, but it answers the question.
That answers the question. Thank you, Simon. Does anybody else want to comment on that question?
Yes, I would like to add, first, if you want to give good medical response to major incident, you need to change your organization and methodology of work, adapted to what is the cause of major incident. So again, I will stress this, thanks to coronavirus and fight against COVID-19 epidemic, because we are in a full training 18 months continuously with hospital command group. So we got a meeting every morning in the hospitals, and we evaluate situations on all departments. We know the capacity of the hospitals, like we are in a full continuously green alert right now 18 months, because we adapt these systems to corona time. So it's easy for us to respond to major incidents because we plan every day.
I can add something as well. The question, what do we want to prepare first within the first hour? And that's a very, very big question, because there's so many things that needs to be happening at the same time simultaneously. And something that we don't speak so much about is, for instance, security, which is very important when it comes to CBRN incidents or terrorist attacks. And we need to, if it's not office hours, we need to get the people in. And that can also take time if you don't have the proper activation plans for that. And also you need to redirect, as you said, other patients and prepare to set up the teams that should be taking care of these patients. So there must be a lot of things happening at the same time. And therefore we all urge everyone to think about this and have continuous and repeated offsetting simulations. You could just start the first hour. That's a good way to start.
Okay, and Boris has said how useful COVID has been insofar as it's allowed his hospital to be on an alert for the last 18 months. But of course, the other side of that is that a lot of hospitals in Europe are full of COVID patients. What would you do if you had a major incident as well as a full hospital?
Yeah, well, we shall adapt. Like the MRMI principle is, you shall always adapt to the situation.
Okay, that was a brief answer. Does anybody else want to add anything to that, or
No,
not? No.
I would like to connect this question to the previous one, because I think they're basically maybe the same. When we look at the initial response for a mass casualty incident, and I'm talking about conventional one, the first thing that you want to achieve in the first hour is to have your emergency department to be able to admit all the patients which are coming in. So if you don't have a big emergency department, you have to empty it out somehow. And then you have to have enough staff, and Carl was talking about the non-office hours, and I mentioned it before, and this can be a problem. So people have to be aware of whoever's in the hospital can be clear from his work, has to go down to the emergency department and help. And once the victims are coming in, their first objective of everyone is to basically to identify those with life-threatening injuries and to provide them the necessary treatment that what they are able to do in the first hour. I think most of the hospitals in which we work do not have enough surgeons in-house during nighttime to be able to open up the operating room and operate, I don't know how many patients, maybe at best they can operate one patient. And you have to have more people coming in, like Carl said. But if you look at the mass casualty incident, the first sites which start functioning do not really deal with the COVID patients. So you might have a problem later on with intensive care place, okay? But you can still take in the patients, examine them, identify those patients with life-threatening injuries, give them priority, even operate on them, okay? And then really the last problem would be, how do you deal with the situation where you don't have enough ventilation machines? What I'm happy about, and it's been mentioned that all of us are MRMI instructors, that we usually talk about the problem of ICU space and ventilation machines in each hospital. And I think the COVID-19 has actually maybe solved many problems in that sense. Now even in Europe, people understand that they need these extra machines and extra space that they didn't have before. And I think in that sense, maybe we are better off now than we were before the COVID-19. And maybe I think the people from Europe, they should be saying if what I'm saying is now correct. But basically, if we're talking about the conventional mass casualty incidents, the first sites which respond are not congruent with the response to the COVID-19.
I think one question which I have to ask the panel is that we had a lot of notice that COVID-19 was coming. We had certainly more than an hour. In some cases, we had weeks and possibly even months. How much or how long did it take before your individual hospitals actually started putting into practice their sort of major incident plan to deal with COVID?
Okay, we started on the first day when the Ministry of the Health of Croatia announced that COVID-19 epidemic is coming, and we started. We give them report that we will activate hospital plan for crisis situation, and we will activate our hospital command group. What the other hospitals in Croatia did, we do not know exactly. Do they follow the MRMI principle or concept? But this hospital, Slavonski Brod, is the education center for MRMI courses in Croatia, and we are full of instructors, and that's our protocol and our strategy, and it works excellent. And we even put methane reports during the COVID epidemic. It works also. It doesn't belong to MRMI concept, but it can be put inside of this strategy, how to run the hospitals during this crisis situation, which will last for years in the future.
Simon,
And sorry, we start 18 months ago. We start with 12 respirators in our hospital, and right now we got 30 respirators. Now we increase capacity for IC units 150%. That's the strategy.
and how long did it take to build up to that level?
Few months.
Okay.
To have that 30 respirators. Yeah.
And Simon, how long did it take to get ready in Slovenia?
You mean about the COVID?
For the COVID, yes, in between knowing that it was coming and actually preparing for it.
Well, it took some decisions to, how to say, to make some investment without out of the legal pathways to be quick enough, because this otherwise it would take 2 years to do something. So luckily we had some unfinished places to immediately adapt them. They were built but without any installations, so they are quickly turned in 3 weeks into the COVID wards, and also the one whole flat of this extra building is used with for the intensive care units with the ventilators. The capacity of ventilators in our hospital more than doubled during this period, so we are running more than 120 ventilators today. But the main problem is the staff. Due to the COVID crisis and due to the burnout syndromes, the number of the nurses is going down. From September last year till today, it's 1 year now, 200 nurses quit, and they weren't able to replace them with the new forces. So this is now, it's not the number of the machines nowadays or the place or the beds, it's the number of the staff who is a limiting factor. So they are actually scavenging the other parts of the hospital to get nurses and also the intensive care doctors to care for these patients. We are not to capacity yet, although we have actually the third wave, because we didn't have the second and third in the beginning of the year. We have one continuous wave all to the May, and we are facing now the dilemma. If the numbers will go up, we will have to cut some surgical procedures, because the anesthesiologists are moved to these COVID wards. Shall we also answer some questions from this Q&A below? I was looking.
We don't have any open questions on the Q&A at the moment.
Yeah, well, there was one, do we have any reserves, something like that? And the second was, is there a European plan for help in the case of the mass casualty incident?
That's a very easy question to answer. No, there isn't a European plan. There are some countries that have cross-border cooperation for mass casualty incidents that happen just on either side of the border, particularly in Central Europe. Did you want to add something to that, Simon? You look like
Yes. Well, it's not actual agreement, but in 2018 there was, and actually just before the COVID crisis, The European Commission passed some, how they say, not the law, but the intention for the mass casualty burns situation to establish the rules how to ask and receive and offer the help in the case of mass casualty burns. And this is a good template on which to build the case if there is a really overwhelming mass casualty incident in some country. So actually the template from this mass casualty burn situation or rules can be applied also to some mass casualty incidents in general. It's not official. Official is only how to deal with the mass casualty burns, but I think it can be also applied to some other place. And if this is something interesting for the wider audience, we can also make a webinar or how to say, to introduce this rule of the European Commission, what they achieved, the history, and why did it. That's also perhaps for one of the next sessions, either in ESTES Congress or in the webinar. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Simon. That's I'm glad that's been cleared up. You did mention that the problem really of burnout, has that been a problem in Croatia, Boris? Because it's always one of the things that we have to plan for in a mass casualty incident is looking after your staff. And when they've been going through it for 18 months, that must take its toll.
Yeah, it is a problem and in every country, and especially in these hospitals which are dedicated to be only COVID-19 hospitals. And there are 4 of them. They are national respiration centers where we send the all heaviest patients from all hospitals to that 4 national centers. And there is for sure a problem with burnout syndrome between physicians and nurses. But what we learn during this time that we need to, because if we change organization and methodology of work, that's mass casualty incident level 1, we can save all the patients which we can save in normal conditions. And I mean, in that case for COVID-19 patients. In that organization model, we need to know that majority of medical personnel need to work outside of their own specialty or subspecialty. That's the main lecture during the MRMI courses. You cannot work like in a normal time. You need to do some work outside of your own specialty, and that's what is happening right now in my hospital, because we adapt organization and methodology of the work for today's situation. And right now we are in yellow alert, and we work in yellow alert with COVID department and with new COVID intensive care unit for COVID-19 patients, which is capacity like the normal intensive care units. So right now in a yellow alert, we have 2 intensive care units in our hospitals. One is for COVID patients and the other is for non-COVID patients. In a normal time, we have only 1 intensive care units. So we adapt, and okay, we do not have enough nurses specialized for intensive care units, but we are doing education. We are developing courses. We have a course for mechanical ventilations in our hospitals. We educate our staff. So we continuously need to perform education and training. Without education and training, it's nothing. We are not preparing for anything. We are just talking.
Thank you, Boris. So education and training are very good ways to support staff and to try and prevent burnout. Does anybody have any other tips, suggestions, or techniques that they use to try and maintain their staff during these very difficult times?
Maybe I would give a different outlook from the COVID and go back to the bombing attacks. And in the 19th, I worked in Jerusalem. I see Miklos Bala is in the audience. And at that time, we had several terrorist attacks in Jerusalem, and it's not a big city. And sometimes you have a situation where you have a mass casualty event, and part of the staff would be saying, maybe some of my family are involved. And that was a difficult situation to deal with. We did have some cases in which family members were injured and killed. And I've seen very tough people who, you know, every day we would receive trauma in the emergency department. Basically, there was some kind of breakdown, and you had to deal with that over the long term. The problem was that there were debriefings done with a psychologist. I don't know how effective they are, but what we noticed was that the physicians never came. It was the nurses who came. And but I did see some people who were burnt out from that reason. And I think in that sense, it's very similar to an earthquake situation, in which sometimes you have to lose some of your staff momentarily, who really feel the urge to go home and find out what's happening with their families. And you know, we heard that in the webinar from Beirut bombing, where one of the participants was working there, one of the surgeons who was talking, Ali, he was talking about his kids. He was all the time thinking, are my kids all right? You know, he had no connection with them. And sometimes it's better off to let some of your people go and find out what's happening. It doesn't sound reasonable to what I'm saying. You want more staff coming in, but you have to take that into consideration.
You also need to have effective staff rather than just numbers. It's quality as well as quantity, isn't it? Carl, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to add the importance of regional command when it comes to these incidents that are really in a very, very big scale, like the COVID-19, and not only regional, but national. And that's something that we lack here. Our regions and our hospitals, they're quite self-managing and have a hard time in accepting pressure from above. And I think it's very, very important to train also the regional commanders in actually stating for the different hospitals and the workers, how much are we going to do? To what extent are we going to work in other specialties than our own? Because we found in the beginning that we could not cope with all the patients that came in and needed the ventilatory support in the same level of care that we're used to. So we had to retrain people all the time. And I think that's very important also when it comes to mass casualty incidents, that from the start, we need to go into the levels and see what kind of level of major incident are we working in. Are we still trying to aim for level 1 where we can save all the ones that are normally salvable, or are we actually in a position where we cannot save everyone? And that needs to be communicated very clearly, not only to the public, but also to the staff, because then we realize, okay, we need to go into a different mode. And that was something that frustrated me a bit in the beginning, that we didn't have this commanders that were trained for this, which took, in the end, it settled. But I think that it's something that we could work on, and I think for coming incidents, that it's very important.
Can we just go around the panel now and ask how many of you feel that with a mass casualty incident, you're working at a hospital level or you're working at a regional level, supported by a regional organizational structure? Boris, what is the situation in Croatia?
You can hear me? Okay. We have it's not a regional command center, it's a county command center, and we have meetings once in a week. So all the principals that we have 2 hospitals in that county and 2 ambulance stations from 2 cities and 2 epidemiological centers, institutes. They got a report and meeting once in a week because it's enough. In the beginning, we got a meeting every day. It's if you are in a red alert. But right now, situation there is enough one meeting during a week, so they can report about and plan all the measures in advance. Because you got statistics, how many COVID-19 patients are in hospitals, how many are them increasing in intensive care units and problems and so on. So that works, and it's very close to MRMI concept. And we also have a national crisis headquarters, or all country is running by EU concept, civil protection mechanism. In the beginning, it was a question which concept Croatia will apply. Homeland security, it's United States model, or civil protection mechanism, it's EU. So Croatia is following EU model, it's civil protection mechanism, and it works very well in Croatia. And in my hospital, we add to that on operational level, which is my hospital and around, MRMI concept. MRMI, it's operational level, it's not strategical level doctrine. So it works very well. I cannot say excellent, but it's because small problems, like usually everyone has some problems. But the main thing is analyze, evaluate, talk, communicating to each other, and analyze all the time what's going on and make plans for the future.
Thank you. Simon, are you part of a hospital or a regional response, would you say, when you have a mass casualty incident?
Well, I would say we are both, because I work in the biggest hospital in Ljubljana, and in all these 6 cases I showed, our hospital was involved, and it's in any case, if something big would happen in our country, we would be involved in any case. So we are working in both settings, like regional and also now we are switching to the so-called dispatch centers, which will work like a regional command center, and it's situated physically near our hospital, adjacent to it. So we are, I can say it's both a regional and a hospital, like municipal hospital.
Sorry, Itamar, would you consider yourself to be part of a regional unit where people are organizing you and supporting you, or do you work on a sort of local hospital level?
Well, thanks for giving me the time to think about the answer. And I think it's a composed one. I have to say it's composed because otherwise maybe I get fired. I work in a government hospital. The thing is that I think for many years, this was a hospital response. And I think it comes back to the question that Simon asked: how do we prepare and how do we practice, and if we do it together or not? The answer is, in Israel, even today, which has had a lot of experience with mass casualty problems, whatever you want to call them, there's hardly any training together of all the different levels. So the hospitals train on their own, the ambulance systems were trained on their own, and we hardly train together. And it is for this reason that I could say, if you would have asked me about 10 years ago, I would have said to you, it's local. Everyone does whatever he knows what to do. In the last 10 years, there has been more preparation done together and more drills done on a national, even on a national level. And some of these, if we talk, for example, in those small, I don't know how to call them, wars or conflicts with Gaza, in which we had many rockets being fired on Israel, and we had to distribute victims between different hospitals. And even during the COVID-19, I think there is more and more a central component to what's being done. And it's not because of a training, it's training during real time, which has done it. So it is a kind of a composed situation. And hopefully we'll get better in the future, not just because of real events, but also because we're able to practice together.
Thank you, Itamar. Carl, I think you started this by your comment, so unless you have anything you want to add, I don't think we need to go there again.
No, sure, but it lies in the topic. I mean, disaster planning is that you cannot do this on your own. If you feel that you are only working for your hospital, you need to widen your perspective and get everybody else talking to each other and get them involved. And civil defense is right now a very hot topic in Sweden, finally again, because we have lagged after for a few years now.
Simon.
Yes, I want to add to what Itamar said, and also Carl. 1 week ago, we had a big exercise together with the civil defense, firefighters, police, and of course, emergency medical services. There was a whole setting it started in the airfield, and then we slowly, everything moved to the hospital. And I just wanted to add, it was a process, like Itamar said, what would we 10 years ago, and now it's a process. It took 10 years for us, the guys from the civil defense and government, if you want to say, accepted that also the healthcare systems has to deal and to prepare, exercise, and train with the other first responders, so to say, like firefighters, police, perhaps sometimes with army and also civil defense.
Thank you.
I think I would like to add that MRMI concept is that we all chains train together. Everyone in pre-hospital and hospital response, and complete management of the incident command system. And we have a lot of work in front of us, because we train by the one scenario that we have a pre-hospital scene, we have a pre-hospital transport, and then hospital treatment inside. And that's in 95% true. But sometimes the hospital by itself could be an incident place. And then it changes everything. And when the hospital is seen, that makes a little change in doctrine and treatment, especially if the hospital is under terrorist attack, for example, And there is a few more scenarios we have to do on it in the future. So I think we have a lot of topics for develop and to make a good medical response to all situations dealing with trauma, not with COVID-19. And I hope this section will work together in the future.
Thank you, Boris. I think that's a very good place to draw this webinar to a close. We've outlined the importance of having a plan, of practicing that plan, of using the MRMI principles to prepare for and to run a mass casualty incident. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank our panelists, Simon Herman, Boris Hrečkovski, Montan, and Itamar Ashkenazi, and our webinar team, Diego Mariani, Alan Biloslavo, Hayato Kurihara, and Mauro Zago. I'd like to leave you with a taster of our next webinar on the non-stop route to the operating room for trauma patients.